All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you again for being here to have this wonderful interview with me. I suppose to start, the best thing we could do is introduce you. So, Kathryn, would you like to introduce yourself to the people?
I would. Yes, I am Dr. Kathryn Ludwig. I am an assistant teaching professor in the English department. And one of the things that I teach is first year composition with the writing program.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Luckily, that's what I have questions for you about today.
Great.
For those who may not know, you are teaching an immersive learning section of composition this year. So I suppose my first question would be, how would you, as someone teaching that type of class, describe an immersive learning class to someone who may be unfamiliar with the term?
Well, immersive learning classes are opportunities for students to learn in partnership with a community organization. Students get to see how their work can impact people outside the classroom. They have the opportunity to serve a community partner and learn from real world situations. And then the community partner, what we want to be sure is that the community partner finds that partnership beneficial to the goals of their organization's work as well.
Okay, so there is a reciprocation there. It's not just
Absolutely.
Your students are gaining something and nothing
Right.
else is being given back.
That's important.
I suppose then, with that idea in mind, and we can sort of spend a little time on this idea as well, but could you just give us a brief overview, excuse me, of how your immersive learning section works, what assignments you have, sort of what your relationship with your partner is, and I guess an extension of that, how do you think you create a reciprocal relationship? Like, what do you do for them and what do they do for you?
Well, my community partner is the YWCA of Delaware County. And we've really established a partnership by frequently asking them what their needs are. And just by doing that, we establish a lot of opportunity for our students to learn. So this course is interesting because in first year composition, our key questions are, how do we write in rhetorical situations? How do we understand who we're composing for, the medium through which we are communicating to them, their motivations, the things they value. Well, in having a community partner, we automatically have those factors determined for us. So merely by telling us what they need, they are giving us the tools we need to analyze rhetorical situations.
That's so interesting. And I think that is something that is extremely invaluable to, instead of having to say, imagine who your audience is to a room full of first year writers, especially, to be able to say your audience is the YWCA of Muncie. Right. What do they need?
That's right.
So
I think the greatest benefit of teaching composition in this way is that the key questions of the course are taken out of the realm of the hypothetical. They're
right.
placed into concrete situations. So, in first year composition, we emphasize the importance of understanding the rhetorical situation in which you're composing. Students usually have to imagine the target audience, what they believe, how they might respond to certain rhetorical choices, when and where they might be interacting with the text. But in this class, all of those factors are clearly defined, and sort of the success or failure of student work is not only measurable, but also impactful. Like, it actually stands to impact people in this organization who are being served by this organization. So, when the semester is over, our major claim in Writing for Change, which is that writing can facilitate change, that should be more than an idea. It should be something that's visible for our students.
I love that. That is wonderful. I suppose then, like, what types of assignments do you give your students? What types of, I guess, work or meetings do you have with your partner as ways to facilitate their understanding of the community partner, as well as to help your community partner tell your students what they need, how they should be writing?
Yeah, so our course spans 2 semesters, which is a wonderful luxury for us as instructors. It's beneficial for the students as well because they will fulfill both of their composition requirements for first year composition. So this means that we've had this opportunity in the fall semester to dedicate our attention to learning about ethical community engagement, learning about sound composition practices, learning about and researching issues that impact our community partner. And so our interactions with the YWCA during that time were mainly with the our contact person in the organization, rather than, you know, people who are receiving benefits from YWCA. During the second semester, we're having a very different experience. Students are being asked to apply their research, doing interviews with local experts. We've done a survey for residents of the YWCA to get their expert perspective and to determine what types of texts will most benefit the YWCA right now. And it's very much a living thing. It kind of pushes us all outside of our comfort zone, which, especially for first year students, understandably, is prescribed projects with clearly defined parameters. But it has the benefit of pushing us to ask why. Why this text? Why this audience? Why this medium of delivery? And, you know, how do we deal with these obstacles?
What are some samples of texts that you're creating?
So this semester, we spent the first few weeks sharing research from last semester. Basically, the students were teaching each other about what they learned. It was kind of a divide and conquer thing. And then determining what combination of texts need to be created in order to help our community partner reach some of their goals, the things that their residents are facing right now. So students are working in pairs to create change portfolios. And these projects are founded on the idea that change doesn't just happen because of a single powerful speech or a single, like, you know, video that goes viral. Right. Change requires a network of mundane texts. You know, you think about the Red for Ed movement. They had to get the word out that people were going to gather. They had to, you know, create flyers. They had to get permits, you know, all of that. All of those mundane texts are part of the bigger movement. And so each student is going to, well, they're working in pairs to create a portfolio dedicated to one of the issues that YWCA has identified as being significant for them right now. And so some of those are, you know, the COVID crisis, the cliff effect, mental health, addiction, and so on. And the portfolios will each include 3 different kinds of texts that will facilitate change in these areas. One is a proposal, one is a letter, either to a legislator, to a potential ally, or a letter to the editor, an article. And the third is a visual or a multimodal text. You know, of course, the students usually go to social media or video. Right. That's where they gravitate. This has really been the biggest challenge that we've faced so far in this class. And that is convincing students that they had the ability to identify what was needed for change in these areas. You know, they really wanted me to tell them what text to create, but they were the ones who did the research. And I am overwhelmed by how they've come through. I mean, really, they really have come up with great ideas for what they can do to make a difference on behalf of our community partners. And I hope that that experience in particular will empower them in the future to see problems in their community and identify ways to make a difference.
That's fantastic. It sounds like you're helping them navigate a level of responsibility that we attempt to get to in a composition class, but because of this direct relationship, they're almost forced into that role of responsibility and citizenship almost.
Right. And that's really the goal of the course. It's to think of ourselves as being, you know, not just future professionals, but as future citizens.
Right. That's awesome. I think that sort of leads us into another question that I had for you that you've already sort of touched on and danced around. But what do you think are the benefits of teaching comp in this way, either for students, which I think you've already mentioned, or for you as an instructor?
Well, I would say that one of the biggest benefits for me has been team teaching. Working with Dr. Romano and Dr. Jones, I mean, they're phenomenal educators. So just sort of getting a chance to work with them this year and see how they do what they do has been really beneficial for me. And what's been even more exciting is to collaborate, to develop projects, share resources. Those are things that I'm going to translate into my traditional comp classroom as well. So, I mean, definitely the experience has made me a better teacher because of getting to work alongside them. But I also think, I think of my traditional first year composition classroom differently now as well. You know, I've always taken sort of an issue-based approach to my Composing Research 104 class. But I see ways that I can make that less hypothetical now, you know, that this doesn't have to be a fully immersive campaign class for us to do things that are immersive, that make a difference.
That's an interesting idea, because I think we often frame these types of classes as something that is completely separate and clearly takes a lot of extra work, but there are, like you're saying, small steps to be like, well, here is a small issue in the community that you can focus on for this, as opposed to, say, larger or global issues as you're responding to them in a research paper.
I was recently talking with Dr. Banco, Susanna Banco, about her daughter had written a letter to their school board because she was concerned about something. And they had said to her, well, if you're confused and concerned, write a letter. And I thought, you know, how many of us in our lives have done that? And I think for sure at the college level, we should introduce students to the reality that they can do that. They can reach out to people in positions of power and ask questions and communicate their, you know, their perspective. That's something that can be incorporated into an assignment very easily in a first year composition class.
Absolutely. I think we're constantly tossing around these ideas of civic engagement and responding to problems in communities, but we don't actually take that step to do the thing.
Yeah.
Love that. I love sort of the moving beyond the hypothetical that you keep bringing up. That's a fantastic thing.
That's really been at the heart of this for me.
That's awesome. And it's also lovely that you and Dr. Romano and Dr. Jones, who are also teaching other immersive learning classes this semester with you, are able to sort of foster this relationship between you. And as you're helping your students engage with a new community, you are sort of building this teacherly community around all of this work that you're doing. So that's a really interesting sort of parallel to how you're helping your students and your community partners by helping each other.
Absolutely. And I think it reminds me the importance of vulnerability as an instructor, to be able to say to the students, you know, this is a pilot course and we're still figuring it out. And here's this great idea I got from Dr. Romano and from Dr. Jones. Let's try this. And to model that, you know, collaborative idea building that I'm asking them to do every day in class.
That's always sort of the ideal, I think, is to model better practices, if not best practices. So I think that that's a lovely thing to remind instructors generally that we can be vulnerable and we can ask questions and we can put things up to our students and say, this might not work, but we'll figure that out at the end. That's
been the last 2 weeks. I mean, genuinely, the students looking at me like, just tell us what to do. Yeah. And I'm going, I'm not going to do it because I know you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then that moment where we have this giant dry erase board with all of the ideas that they've come up with and it's mapped out and we all stand back and I just look at them like, you did it.
You have ideas.
You did it. I told you you can.
That's wonderful. That's fantastic. So this is sort of a difficult question, I think, but you've also sort of hinted at this idea as well as we've been talking. But no class is all positivity and happy and rainbows. So alongside these wonderful successes you seem to have had with your students, have you had any struggles with them? You've mentioned sort of this idea of constantly reminding them that they do know what they're capable of and they are able to figure out ways to meet these goals. But is there anything else that you have found difficult that you've had to work through with students that might be unique to an immersive learning course?
Well, I'm also teaching a 400 level immersive learning course this semester alongside my first year comp immersive learning course.
Interesting.
So interesting comparisons to be made there, right? So these 400 level students have a degree of autonomy that we obviously don't expect of first year students. I think of first year comp as, in addition to teaching writing, and is college 101. I want to make sure students know how to do college after they leave my class. And so having to incorporate a lot of those skills and making explicit, how do we read an assignment prompt? How do we, what are the expectations? I mean, incorporating all of that in the context of an immersive class where I'm asking them to take the reins on a lot of the decisions is a huge challenge. And so I think a first year immersive class is a unique challenge in itself. And I've definitely felt bumps in the road about that. I would say that it kind of played out in the transition from the number of students I had first semester to the number of students I have second semester. Those that stuck with me are the ones who are like, I'm up for it, right?
Right.
And those who didn't, I totally understand. They want a more structured, mapped out experience of first year composition. And I really appreciate their self-knowledge in making a different choice. I did try to really provide a lot of explanation for why we were doing what we were doing. And that is, I think, the key for an immersive first year experience, is to explain the rationale for what may be perceived as withholding. Like she's holding out on us, you know, but to explain, you know, why is it important for you to be involved in this planning, for you to decide what a rubric for this assignment, what does success look like on this kind of project. And so there have been extra challenges in that way. And I also, just anecdotally, have a very quiet group of students. Interesting.
Which I imagine is a bigger challenge in this type of class.
For sure. And that, you know how that is. It's just the mix of personalities. I had 14 students who came back spring semester, and I know that every one of them is all in, but they're just not extremely vocal. And so I've had to really find different ways to coordinate interaction or, you know, collaborative work, because it's not going to be full class discussion the way it is in my 400 class, where everyone, you can hardly get a word in. Add to that COVID. So we're doing a speed dating style feedback session, and I have to hand everyone a wipe whenever they get up and carry the trash can around before they can move.
Right. Oh, yeah, I was going to ask a question about sort of retention, but how do we ask questions about retention in the middle of a pandemic?
Honestly.
But it does sound like you have 14 students that decided to stick on to an extremely unique course that they have probably.
I'm amazed.
Yes, that's wonderful. That's good to hear, though.
Feels like a win.
How many of these students, if you don't know this is fine, clearly, but how many of these students knew what they were signing up for?
Most did not. I had maybe 4 that had contacted me at the beginning of fall semester and said, I want to take this class because I'm interested in the immersive component. Most of the others were just kind of dumped in there, and I had to explain the first day what this was and say, get out now if you're not, you know.
How did that conversation go?
There was nowhere for them to go because all the classes were full, and they were like, okay.
Fair, yeah, that's fair.
So, I mean, it was evident pretty early on, a few that were just kind of going to hang on for the ride.
Right.
You know, and I tried to find ways to make it, to make sure that they were getting a traditional 103 in terms of skills they were developing and all of that. And it was possible for them to succeed, even if they weren't really truly invested in the immersive part. But there was also just like the communal goals of the class. Right. And developing a sense of community and collaboration. So it's tricky.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure.
I'm constantly sending Lynn and Laura, okay, so this happened.
Right.
And then they do the same, so.
But it's nice that you have that cushion, I suppose. The cushion of your fellow instructors. Yeah.
Doing this on my own. No way.
I'm sure. No, I'm sure absolutely this would be extremely difficult. But also there is sort of the cushion as well that you mentioned before of vulnerability with your students, of letting them know, like, one, clearly most of you didn't know what you were getting yourselves into.
Yes.
But
Yes.
also, yeah, that cushion of being able to say, like, we're going through this together and we're going to figure out what all of this means is sometimes a blessing, if not always a blessing.
Right. And in the fall
Yeah.
semester, because Lynn and Laura and I had spent the summer planning the course, we had collaborated with Steve Parks, right, who is,
Right.
you know, community writing is his thing, and he
Yes.
advised us so beautifully. The course was well mapped out. I felt very confident going into that semester. This semester, it really comes down to the needs of our individual partners.
Right.
So we're a lot more on our own. So Lynn and Laura and I are kind of doing different things beyond that first interview project. And so there has been a lot of uneasiness, like, guys, I know it seems like we don't know what we're doing. We don't, but we will.
Good. Yes.
Which is why it was such a relief when we got there and we're like, okay, now we know.
A question that sort of just came up for me. Do you find yourself equally concerned about the needs of your community partner and of your students?
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because that is, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I mean, these are people in homelessness in the middle of a pandemic, you know, and it's not like we have the capacity necessarily to change their lives, but we have an opportunity to do something. And I think the students who stuck around felt that that was a gift in the middle of a time where they couldn't control much.
Right.
You know, after we had the first meeting with our community partners, that was something the one student said. They said, you know, with everything that's going on with, you know, race relations in our country and with this pandemic, I feel like I can't control anything, but I can control my contribution to people who are suffering. And I want to do that. And so we really feel like we want to do our best.
That's fantastic. Because I think that's a concern as an instructor that someone who hasn't done something like this won't ever have had. Their main concern is their students. And you now have this, I don't want to say like dual pull in your concerns and where you're spending a lot of your time. But I think what makes that not a problem is that, like you just said, your students also feel that sense of responsibility.
Well, and I think as instructors, we're always trying to convince our students that what we're teaching them has value.
Right.
It's a built-in so what.
Absolutely.
They know why we're doing what we're doing.
That's fantastic. Hypotheticals. They don't exist for you.
It's not. It's actual, you're going to make a difference. So
that's awesome. That's so great. I suppose just sort of to wrap up today, what's left for your students? What does the remainder of the year look like for them? What's left to do in your class?
Yeah, so right now they are scheduling interviews with people in the community who have firsthand experience with the issues that they're working on. And we are working with Antonio Gramsci's definition of an intellectual as not necessarily someone who's in a position of power, but as someone who can speak to an experience or an issue authoritatively. And so, you know, obviously residents of the YWCA are intellectuals on the experience of homelessness.
Right.
And people who work at, you know, like places where they services or, you know, homeless or soup kitchen, things like that. So we're reaching out depending on what their topics are. Students have crafted that even the first email, crafting an email. Dear so-and-so, here's who I am. Here's what I'm working on. Would you be willing to speak with me? I mean, that's something that we walked through together because you know, it's like I'm telling the students, you have to go out there and talk to people. And they're like, are you sure? So I'm going to send this email now. I should send it? Yes, send it.
Okay. Very much the Gen Z millennial experience.
I have to go talk to someone?
Right.
It's hard. And so that's what they're doing first. And then they're working in pairs to really find out who's the person in, you know, legislative body or the, you know, the company that could really provide resources. We need cleaning supplies for COVID care at the YWCA? Is there a company? One student suggested that we partner with a local high school for their, they have honor society
right,
service projects,
right.
and I think that's such a great idea. She was basing that on her own experience and would never have occurred to me. So they're identifying whom to reach out to and what kind of text to create in order to get those things started. And that's going to be the bulk of the remainder of the semester.
That sounds exciting, difficult, but fulfilling in the end.
And they're really using their interests. I mean, I have a TCOM major she's going to make a video that can be used by the YWCA, including a lot of different testimonies from people, talking about what it's like to be in homelessness, or talking about cliff effect, which is something we've been learning so much about this year and has been really impactful for all of us. Just how once you get a tiny pay raise and your benefits drop, how it's impossible for people to keep moving forward. That's been an interesting concept for us.
Do you feel like this class has given students a chance to better use their majors or their major interests?
Well, it asks them to see how does your major fit into, the social structure, right? Because this is one area where I'm asking you to use it. Think about other areas, and they've done that. They really have.
That's awesome. That, again, sort of the goal, one of the goals, I think, of a composition class is to let them see how our experience can fit into their worlds, but taking that the next step and then helping them to see how their experiences can fit elsewhere is fantastic.
Yeah. And, we often ask students, when you're choosing a topic for your research paper, think about something in your major.
Right.
And if a student is kind of reluctant to do that, or they're like, I'm not that interested, that's kind of an early sign. Maybe I'm not that into this major. I mean, really, at first year students are still figuring that out. Right. And I think this opportunity to actually apply their major to a project has been another type of value there.
Absolutely. That's extremely valuable. I suppose, sort of as the final wrap-up question, I know I said that was a wrap-up question, but I'm giving you another one. Is there anything else that you want to share about your class that you feel like we didn't touch on today? Just anything else you have in your brain that I would like to have out of your brain?
Let me think.
Of course.
I'm really hopeful that this will become a permanent offering in the department. And that was the vision we went into the pilot with, because I think the more it becomes something that's workshopped and crafted well, it just has an opportunity to connect students who want to see college as something other than the ivory tower, right? I mean, the immersive classes, they help with retention, especially of, first generation students and the kind of students that we have at Ball State. So I'm hopeful that we will turn this into a regular offering with our department, and people will sign up for it intentionally,
right?
Because they've heard about what a great thing it is.
And I think that's important. From what you've talked about today, just the benefits that students can and clearly have gotten from your class, from the other two classes that have been offered so far, being able to say that that's something we value is really important, I think, especially in the year 2021.
Yes, this has been the year for it. I mean, I think we all want to say that we're responding to the world around us somehow, and I think it's helped us in our class to feel a little less anxious because we're not quite as helpless as we would be without it.
What a wonderful way to end. I think that is the perfect place we can stop. So I just want to thank you again for engaging in this platform and doing the work that you do as a teacher. So thank you for both of those things.
Thank you so much, Zach. It was great to talk to you, and I'm so thankful for the opportunity to get to share with you about this class.
I agree. We will be following up in the future because I still have questions.
Wonderful. Bye.
All right.